It was a crisp Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago when 42-year-old Vanessa Carter, a successful black entrepreneur, walked into the gleaming lobby of Summit First Bank. Her heels clicked against the polished marble floor, echoing the confidence of a woman who had built her empire from the ground up. Today was supposed to be a milestone, the final step in securing a $2 million loan for her latest project, a community-focused housing development called Harmony Heights. The project was personal for Vanessa. It was her way of giving back to the neighborhood where she had grown up, a place that had shaped her resilience and determination. Vanessa approached the front desk with a calm smile. "Good morning," she greeted the young teller. "I'm Vanessa Carter. I have a 10 a.m. meeting with Mr. Thompson." The teller, a woman in her mid-20s, glanced at her screen and then at Vanessa. Her smile faltered slightly. "Let me inform Mr. Thompson that you've arrived," she said, her tone polite but noticeably cooler. "Please have a seat, Miss Carter." Vanessa nodded and took a seat in one of the sleek leather chairs in the waiting area. It was 9:55 a.m., and she was right on time. She pulled out her phone, skimming through her notes to prepare for the meeting. The loan was practically a done deal. Her credit score was impeccable, her business portfolio robust, and her project had already been approved by the bank's underwriting team. This meeting was supposed to be a formality, but Vanessa knew better than to take anything for granted. By 10:15 a.m., Vanessa noticed the teller glancing nervously in her direction and whispering to a colleague. Her chest tightened slightly, but she remained composed. She had learned early in life that poise was often her best weapon. At 10:30 a.m., Vanessa decided to inquire. She walked back to the counter, her tone polite but firm. "Excuse me, I just wanted to confirm. Has Mr. Thompson been informed that I'm here?" The teller hesitated, fumbling with her keyboard. "Yes, ma'am. He's aware. He's just finishing up some other tasks right now. He'll be with you shortly." Vanessa nodded, though her patience was starting to wear thin. She returned to her seat, crossing her legs and straightening her posture. She noticed other customers coming and going, each one being attended to promptly. Meanwhile, the clock continued to mock her professionalism with every tick. By 11 a.m., Vanessa stood again, this time her voice carrying a sharper edge. "It's been an hour past my appointment time. I'd like to know what's causing the delay." The teller hesitated before picking up the phone. After a quiet exchange, she put the receiver down and said, "Mr. Thompson will be out shortly." Shortly turned into another half hour. Finally, the bank manager emerged. His appearance did little to soften Vanessa's rising frustration. David Thompson was a middle-aged man with an air of arrogance, his navy suit perfectly tailored and his slick-back hair glinting under the overhead lights. He approached Vanessa with a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Miss Carter, apologies for the wait," he said, his tone more dismissive than apologetic. "We've been swamped this morning." Vanessa held her ground, looking him square in the eye. "I had a 10 a.m. appointment. It's now 11:45. I'd appreciate it if we could proceed." "Of course," he said, gesturing toward his office. "Right this way." As they walked past the teller stations, Vanessa couldn't help but notice the subtle glances exchanged by the staff. It was as though her presence had disrupted the unspoken order of the bank. Once inside his office, Mr. Thompson motioned for her to sit, then took his time settling into his chair, arranging his papers as though she had nothing better to do than wait on him. "Now," he began, leaning back in his chair, "what can I do for you today, Miss Carter?" Vanessa resisted the urge to clench her fists. "I believe you're already aware. I'm here to finalize the loan for the Harmony Heights development. All the documents should be in your system." Mr. Thompson's eyes flicked over his computer screen. He clicked his mouse a few times, then leaned back again, folding his hands over his stomach. "Ah, yes. The Harmony Heights project. That's quite an undertaking. Yes, it is, Vanessa replied, her tone steady. But as you'll see, I've met every requirement. My business plan, financial records, and projections have all been reviewed and approved by your underwriting team. This is the final step. Mr. Thompson's lips curled into a thin smile. I see. Well, these things take time, Miss Carter. I'll need to review everything again to ensure there are no discrepancies. I was informed that the loan was already approved, pending your signature, Vanessa countered. That's correct, he said, his words dripping with condescension. But I like to take a personal look at these matters. You understand, of course. Vanessa bit the inside of her cheek, her anger bubbling just below the surface. She knew what this was, a deliberate attempt to undermine her, to assert his control in a situation where she had done everything right. But she also knew better than to let him see her rattled. Take all the time you need, Vanessa said, her voice smooth as glass. I'll wait right here. Mr. Thompson's smile faltered ever so slightly, but he nodded and turned back to his screen. The minutes stretched into an hour as he clicked leisurely through her files, occasionally making notes or asking irrelevant questions. Vanessa answered each one with precision, her frustration masked by an unyielding composure. By the time the clock struck 12:45, Vanessa had reached the limits of her patience. She stood abruptly, forcing Mr. Thompson to look up in surprise. Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice firm but calm, I value professionalism and respect, and I expect the same from those I do business with. If there's an issue with my application, I'd appreciate it if you could address it directly. Otherwise, I believe we've wasted enough time. Mr. Thompson blinked, his demeanor shifting into defensive arrogance. Miss Carter, I assure you I'm just doing my due diligence. And I assure you, Vanessa replied, that I'm more than capable of recognizing a delay tactic when I see one. If my business is not welcome here, I'll be happy to take it elsewhere. Before Mr. Thompson could respond, a knock on the office door interrupted them. A junior employee, Emily, poked her head in, her expression apologetic. Excuse me, Mr. Thompson, the regional board members have just arrived for their meeting. The color drained from Mr. Thompson's face. He stood abruptly, smoothing his tie as though the room had grown 10 degrees hotter. Of course, he stammered. Please show them to the conference room. I'll be there shortly. Emily nodded but hesitated, glancing at Vanessa with a flicker of recognition. Actually, one of the board members specifically asked to see Miss Carter. Vanessa's eyebrows lifted, her curiosity piqued. Mr. Thompson's expression darkened as he turned to her, his discomfort now palpable. It seems you have quite the connections, Miss Carter, he said, his voice strained. Vanessa met his gaze evenly. Yes, it seems I do. Vanessa straightened her posture, following Emily out of the office with deliberate grace. The tension in the air was palpable as Mr. Thompson trailed behind, his footsteps sharp and hurried against the marble floors. The bank lobby buzzed with quiet murmurs as employees and customers alike watched the small procession head toward the executive conference room. The doors to the room were propped open, revealing a cluster of impeccably dressed board members engaged in animated conversation. At the center of the group stood James Mitchell, a tall, silver-haired man whose commanding presence seemed to brighten the space. When he spotted Vanessa, his face broke into a warm smile. Vanessa? He called out, his voice booming with genuine delight. Mr. Mitchell, Vanessa replied, returning his smile as she approached. He extended his hand, but Vanessa bypassed it, giving him a brief but heartfelt hug. The other board members exchanged curious glances, clearly intrigued by the familiarity. James, you're looking well, Vanessa added, stepping back. And you're as sharp as ever, he said, gesturing toward a chair. Please, have a seat. I hope Mr. Thompson has been taking good care of you. The question was innocent enough, but the way Mitchell's gaze darted toward Mr. Thompson made it clear he suspected otherwise. Vanessa hesitated for a moment, her eyes briefly locking with Thompson's. His expression was stiff, his hands fidgeting at his sides. "Let's just say the morning has been eventful," Vanessa said diplomatically as she sat down. James's brows furrowed, but he didn't press the issue. Instead, he turned to the other board members. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Vanessa Carter, one of the sharpest minds in real estate development. Her Harmony Heights project is exactly the kind of forward-thinking investment we need." The board members greeted Vanessa warmly, some nodding in recognition. Mr. Thompson, who had been hovering awkwardly by the door, stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "Yes, Vanessa and I were just finalizing the details of her loan application," he interjected, his voice tight. "It's a complex project, and I was ensuring all due diligence was completed." Vanessa glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "That's an interesting way to describe it," she said, her tone neutral but laced with subtle challenge. James's sharp eyes didn't miss the underlying tension. "Is that so?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge of curiosity. He turned back to Vanessa. "And how's the process been from your perspective?"